Well, June wants to try something new. She wants to try someone new from Gilead. And we cut to the magic Secret Service phone. And Twello.
And Larry.
And Larry, who answers, "Hello, June Osborne. And hello, Canada. You must want something."
Well,
I love
he's
him
no
just
fool.
kind of
He
getting
knows
right to the point.
he knows he's
Yes,
performing to an
yes.
audience.
Yeah.
Yep. This conversation was really painful, and I think it was painful because we've seen June helpless in a lot of situations. But when she's in a situation where there's like intellect and cleverness involved, Larry always seems to be her one stumbling block. I always feel like historically, those two, they get under each other's skin. They have a way of like doing this tit for tat kind of banter. And I love it, but it's also painful because in this scene, she was so obviously like at a disadvantage. Like the things that she was saying, it was inadequate. Her replies, they were just inadequate. You could see that she was floundering. It was almost like she was out of practice.
Do you know what jumped out at me about what was different? Because obviously it's very parallel to when she was calling Luke, right? So my mind went straight to that scene. But the difference between those two interactions is, yes, people were listening on both ends, but when she was in Larry's office calling Luke, everyone was behind her. So at least she got to not see their reaction and feel like she could at least focus on what she's trying to say and get through to him in a way that was a little coded and get what she still needed from the conversation. But she's thrown off her game right from the start in this setup because she's facing Luke and Tuello. So now she's got to deal with their facial reactions, their wants and needs and motivations, while also trying to figure out Larry, who she has, it's a phone conversation and it's Larry. It's always hard to have a intellectual conversation with him. Like you said, she's always kind of had to learn from him. But he says by the end of it, like, you're off your game. And it's because she has to stare at Luke while she says no to this offer that he's putting on the table for her because she just can't take that. She can't make that choice again. But the proposition that he offers her of why aren't you at least bargaining for 5, it made me think of when they were first introduced and first learning each other. In episode 2 of season 3, Mary and Martha, when he gives her that ultimatum, or pretty much tells her to make a choice. And that time she has to save 5. But this time she's damning 5 for her one child. Like that, you can't put that on her, except for now she's got to look at Luke, who's literally sitting with his hands clasped. Like, you have it in your power to bargain, but I just don't think she can live with that on her conscience of sending 5 kids back for her one child.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that's like the biggest, like, you're absolutely right about that. I think that the moral dilemma of choosing between Hannah and 10 kids that were on the Angel's flight, it doesn't matter whether or not they miss their parents or they miss their families back home in Gilead, as Larry so manipulatively put it. It's the notion of, it harkens back to, an earlier episode in this season when June says, my life is not worth more than anyone else's. And she realizes it's the same thing with Hannah. As much as she has an emotional investment in Hannah, Hannah's life is not worth more than these 10 other kids. And to have to make that decision, I think actually showed a lot of maturity and growth on her end. So I think Larry saying to her, like, wow, you've gone soft in Toronto, must be all that maple syrup, is a dig, because now instead of focusing on what is going to be best for her and herself in a very ruthless fashion, June's more humanized because she can be now.
See, I think that he got under her skin a little bit when he started talking about the fact that she was full of heartache and trouble. And what kind of mother would she be? I honestly think that was part of her decision-making process, because we know that since she stepped foot in Canada, nothing has been what she imagined it to be. And I think she's really starting to take to heart what everyone's been telling her of, you have to let this child go. You're worse with her than letting her go. Like, it's safer for her to just exist in Gilead. Many people have told her this and she can't hear it. And by the time Larry says it here, I think she's almost believing it, because why wouldn't you believe it at this point if you're June? Because she is heartache and trouble at this point. Like everything is difficult, and bringing Hannah into the mix isn't going to make anything easier. Like logically, I don't know if she's thinking about all of that, but I do think it's interesting that he made that comment at a point where I feel like she is, through this episode, trying to learn to accept that she can't get Hannah out right now. Like she is starting to not move on, but accept this fact that everyone else has told her for so long she needs to accept.
I feel like it was a really low blow on his part, too. He says your love fucks people up. That's just a shitty thing to say. She's already struggling with everything you could possibly think of, trying to recover from 7 years in Gilead. So no doubt that is going to come with its own host of self-esteem issues and how people perceive you and shame and everything else that just comes along with that experience. And for him to say that, I was like, God damn it, Larry. He was especially emotional in this conversation because he goes for that low blow right there, and then he ends with him getting kind of choked up when him and June are signing off, and June says we love her, we are her family. That clearly pains him. And I was just surprised that it's just one of the few times we see him really actually visibly distressed over something.
He doesn't have anyone that is family now that can say that they love him. And I think that for him it sort of, I don't want to put words in Larry's mouth, or thoughts in his brain, but it definitely, like, for me, like, seeing his face sort of drop like that. And when she said that, like, we love her, we're your family, Joseph, I know you're a good man. Like, for me, like, that feels like the sort of thing that, like, we've heard Eleanor say to him, like, you're a good man. And he sort of sighed and said, I've heard they're hard to find. And I think that, like, that sort of back and forth banter for me was the most genuine part of this conversation. Because he was willing to let his guard down just for a second.
Yeah, I love that line too. And it's not just Eleanor that said that, it's June. June said it in their first conversation early on in season 3. She says the same thing about him when she's trying to appeal to him. She doesn't say that he is a good man, but she's trying to appeal to what she thinks might be a good man under there. And she says, I know you can do the right thing. It's that same sort of sentiment. And she does throw it in his face often of, I know you want to do the right thing. So for him to kind of harken back to that sentiment really got me. And I think that I hear what you're saying, Scarlett, about, like, it's definitely a low blow to say to her, but I do think he believes it. Like, I think that logic of the situation is what he's trying to appeal to. When he tells her she went soft, he's, like, kind of trying to appeal back to that, like, very factual, logical Larry operation that he really spent all of season 3, like, mentoring her to be the June that we see. And now he's on the phone and he's realizing what he probably always feared was that getting to Canada wasn't really going to change a lot for her. And more or less it hasn't, that we've seen.
Right. I'm inclined to agree with that. And considering, like, when he hangs up and then he says, if you can. And, like, he knows that she's not going to be able to lead a happy life without some sort of, like, positive resolution. Because the last interaction that she had with Hannah was traumatic for both of them. And she'll never be able to lead a happy life until she has some sort of, like, at least neutral closure.
Yeah. And he said the same thing about Eleanor and why it was better that she died in Gilead instead of making it to the United States, or making it out to the United States, to Canada. He had said some things along the lines of, even if she gets out, she won't ever be able to find happiness with the traumas that she's seen. And I think he's seeing the same thing in June in this moment.
That's a really
and it hurts
good
him,
point.
because I think there is I really feel like there's a lot of relationship love happening throughout all these scenes with all these different people. I think Moira and June have the most stilted relationship at this point, but we're seeing progress in June and Luke's relationship, and wherever it goes remains to be seen, but at least they're learning to coexist and focus in on the one thing that brought them together to begin with, is Hannah's always been that uniting force between them, and now they've got that renewed sense of purpose.
Off the record theory, just seeing this like interaction with him and June, and then now we've got Janine placed in back in Gilead, and this thing going on with, like, you know, Aunt Lydia and Esther and whatnot. I wonder if they're setting us up for basically like Larry, like a Larry, Janine, Aunt Lydia triangle of some sort, where the long game purpose is to try to preserve Hannah and get her out with the bonus of all that information that was going to go with them in the testaments. I'm wondering if they're going to try to craft this so that they like intertwine, and just out of guilt or whatever, or out of obligation, Larry sets in motion all the things that we read about in the testaments. I mean, I know he does to a point, but I just wonder if it's more purposeful than what we know at the moment.
How apt would Janine be to help June, even if it is indirectly at this juncture?
I think she's going to help, because I got the feeling at the end of this episode that that
she still has
Janine
the
is
fight in her.
still
Cool. I just
kinda
wanted to see if you
committed
guys
to
read that
fucking
the
some
same way
shit
I
up
did
in
too.
some way.
It's like when she says to Esther, "You need to be alive for when things get better."
No, that was such a cool spin and way to look at it. I'm like, oh my God, June got out. Her person got out. Right.
Man,
I
I'm
know.
actually more excited about that scene now.
I know. I I do have one other side note, Scarlett. I forget what episode, you might remember better, but I know recently you had this tangent of a thought of Larry saying something to June about did they get what they deserve, and then you backtracked it and you were like, no, I don't think he said it. It was when he talked to Emily about the finger getting cut off. He did say it. It's in the Mary and Martha episode. Yeah. So he says he asked June, so she had just showed up as his new handmaid. And he is talking about the Waterfords, and he's like, you left the place in literal ashes. You know, Serena's defingered, Fred's this, Fred, the baby is napped. You know, it was that whole list. And then he asked her, do you think they got what they deserve? And she responds with, no one in Gilead gets what they deserve. So I don't remember the context of what we were wondering, but there is a point where he does ask her about who deserves what.
Okay. It's really, I love how you
such a great
just
line.
listed,
I just
like,
love
this
that.
litany of fucking bullshit that, like, I love June. She's my favorite character ever, and Serena is my favorite character ever to hate. Serena, because she's fucking terrible and it's amazing, and I'm like, how can someone so amazing be so terrible? But then with June, I'm just like, this bitch just goes and pours gasoline around and throws the match and walks away. It's just beautiful. I love her.